Hey, so welcome back for a new tutorial. This is the first of hopefully many in the future. I've been having requests on Patreon for tutorials and how to take something from a on paper traditional drawing and turning it into a digital piece. This is how we do all of our comic pages as well. I never could quite get the right feel for actually doing the drawing on a tablet. My hand is too shaky, or it's too slidey, or something about the texture, and I just don't like it. So I keep doing my traditional inks, much like I'm doing here. It's a little bit sped up, but you get the idea. It's a pencil sketch on paper, and I'm just going with a pen and going over the lines and getting all the detail. A lot of, and this is Link from Breath of the Wild, and a lot of the details on his garb has all these little intricate lines and little loops and little triangles, and I'm going to save a lot of those for the digital part. But I've put them in the sketch kind of loosely just to have an idea of where they would be. After I ink with the pen, I go over with an eraser and I just kind of knock the pencil out a little bit. It doesn't have to be really strong, because I'll show you later when we get it scanned and put it in digitally. Then I tend to mess with the levels and get rid of a lot of the grays anyway, so where it's just the inks that show up. Makes it a lot easier for coloring, makes it look better in the end. Anyway, basically going through here, doing some inking, getting those final details, and then I'm going to move it as a final finished drawing to the scanner. And I have just an Epson scanner that I like, and it's simple. It doesn't have to be fancy. This is just something to scan and print small, regular paper size stuff. So here I have it open in Photoshop CS2, which was what I use. I've used it since college, and I've just never felt the need to upgrade, because for what I do, you don't really need much. As you can see here, you've got the paper texture in the back and the pencils. We're going to go up into images, adjustments, and then brightness, contrast. Usually I like to have the contrast up somewhere around 60 and the brightness somewhere around 30. That tends to make my ink stand out and the paper gets that stark white contrast. And sometimes you play around with it a little bit. You see a couple of lines are still there, but they're not going to be a big deal at this point. The next thing you'll need is Photoshop has wonderful, wonderful layers, and that is how we do it. In a coloring book, you color on the same layer as the lines, and sometimes if you go over the lines, then it will show over the black a little bit. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new layer that is a copy of the background layer. The background layer has a lock on it, the original one, so we're going to get rid of that, because that'll keep us from being able to edit the layer at all. And we need it to be mobile, and we need it to be transparent. So underneath this new background layer, we're going to create a new layer that's just a transparent layer. I'm going to move it underneath, and we're going to turn the background layer to multiply. That makes it the white transparent, but the black is still solid, which means that on that layer underneath, we should be able to apply color, and it won't affect the lines. It won't go over. If we erase anything, it won't erase our nice line art that we've worked so hard on. Then a lot of times what I'll do is I'll select areas. So let's go down to his hair here. And on the background layer, because that's where your lines are, I'm going to use the selection tool and select, exactly, okay, see that thing I was saying about the open lines that you want to be so careful about? We're going to go in there, and on the line layer with some black, we're going to fill that little gap. As far as I know, this one and the one down below his ear are going to be the only little gaps that we have. If we fill those in on the line layer, it will give us something easier to fill in. Okay, so that's taken care of. We're going to take the selection tool again and select the hair. See, now it just selects within that area. And we're going to select all the pieces of the hair. Up at the top, if you'll notice, there's the little the options. You want the multiple selections so that you can just select, and then do your thing. That way you don't have to select and color one thing at a time. So we've selected this whole area. We're going to go to select, and we're going to modify it to expand. Normally I expand this selection about 2 pixels because you can see on the inside of the layer where I've selected, it goes right to the edge of the line. I want it to be inside the line so that when I put color on the layer beneath it, it won't have any gap between the black and the color. As you can see, that dotted line is now inside the line. So I'm going to go and take some Link Hair Yellow, and I'm going to basically bucket fill that selection on the layer under the background layer. As you see there, as soon as I remove the selection, it's perfect, seamless, goes from color to line. There's a couple little spaces that I'll have to touch up later and make sure that they're all nice and smooth, but otherwise that's pretty much how I do it. Next, let's go for the blue of his shirt, and it's basically the same process. We select on the background layer, we select the area that we want to color. There's that spot between the belt, you got to remember, and the little bits in the folds. And then we're gonna go back up, we're gonna expand that selection, and to 2, and then back down on the layer under the background layer. I'm gonna bucket fill, and it'll just do that just right. Boom. Let's see. Next, we'll do his cape. It's a darker blue. It's kind of a navy. I might have to get a color reference here in a bit just to make sure that I'm getting him just right. There's something about video game and cartoon characters that you want to make sure that their colors match. That's one of the defining traits of a good cartoon character, is being able to recognize them by their colors. So I may have to get a color reference here in a bit. But I'm just kind of doing the full blocks of color. I'm going to skip ahead to where I have almost everything colored. And as you can see, everything's colored except for these little bits that I forgot. We'll get that. Here is a reference of Link that I pulled up for the details on his armbands and on his shirt. And I'm just going to borrow colors from those and kind of do the lines. This is all freehand. I like doing it this way because it doesn't have an outline on the patterns. It makes it look like it's more part of the fabric itself. Every once in a while I'll do this. I don't like doing this very often in the comic because it's a little more time intensive. It's worth it for the details, and so I do it sometimes because it looks really good. But I'm just kind of going through here and adding all the little details that I notice on his cape, the little loops and everything. Basically going through, doing some touch-ups, doing the wrapping on his sword. I decided it didn't need outlines. The outlines made it look too boring, I guess. Anywho, don't need that reference anymore. I've got everything I need. From here on out, we're going to do some background and shading. A lot of times I like to contrast the color. So if there's a lot of blue, I'll put in a background that's orange. We'll go ahead and select the areas of his sword swing, because I'm going to make them kind of a bluish metal swing. And then going in with an eraser on a lower opacity, coming and knocking off some of that harshness so that it's just kind of a gradient swing. I'm throwing on some more background details. I'm just kind of speeding up here because a lot of this is something you just kind of have to get a feel for. And I may put a little bit of a tutorial on shading and everything later more specifically, but I tend to just kind of go over all the areas and then I blur it. And then I select all the area outside the color and delete it so that it gets it right to the edge. And then once you have your lights from below, you want your lights from above, or your shades and shadows and highlights. This is the kind of thing that'll make your character look more three-dimensional. I'll take another brush and kind of smooth things out and blur things around, make it look like the shadows are where they're supposed to be. There's a lot more to that, but this will kind of do it as far as how to bring a pencil drawing and turn it into a digital drawing, at least for the basics. I'll probably go more in depth on how I do all the shading and the highlights and what to look for and what I'm thinking about when I'm doing them later in a separate tutorial. It's more dedicated to that sort of thing. Give this a little bit of an outline, and make Link stand out from the background a little bit, give him some of that Hero of Time shiny glory. And yeah, and there you go.